I'm Don Pratt, host of a show here on Rogers TV where we give you a perspective of policing your community. Welcome to Policing York Region. Today we're going to be talking about Project Erase, which is eliminate racing activity on our streets everywhere. Sergeant Dan Sainaman,
yes,
thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and this is a topic that we've talked about several times, but we've never actually had the opportunity to have it on the air. So really glad to have you here so we can learn a little bit about Project Erase.
I'm glad to be here.
So first of all, what's your unit about then?
Well, I'm part of the Road Safety Bureau.
Okay.
I'm actually the sergeant in charge right now of the Commercial Motor Vehicle Inspection Team and the Programs and Partnership Unit under Staff Sergeant Riddell.
Okay.
Staff Sergeant Riddell.
Yes.
And we work very closely together. Mm-hmm. Erase has always been something that has been part of that portfolio.
Okay.
And it involves all our frontline Road Safety Bureau members, our Commercial Motor Vehicle teams, our core units, and our frontline uniformed personnel.
Oh, you've got quite a few entities involved in this.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Okay, so when we're talking about eliminate racing activity on our streets everywhere, not all of us get a full understanding of just like what does that mean? Are we talking about people just going over the speed limit?
No. What Erase is about is the really aggressive, high risk, negative behaviors that really have an impact on the entire community. For the most part, the people who are involved in these things themselves they call themselves car enthusiasts, and we can completely respect that because most people are car enthusiasts.
Sure.
It's the negative behavior that comes with the events, and not all events have it,
no.
But there are certain events that will pop up from time to time, and you get the stunting, you get the burnouts, you get all those kind of negative behaviors that have a high risk for somebody getting injured or, maybe even killed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, no, that's yeah. So when you're talking about organized car groups, I guess, I've been to them. They're fantastic. We're just going to see some, somebody's put in some fine tuning on their 72 Chev.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat to see. That's not really who we're talking about here today.
No, most of those groups are going to be your standard car enthusiasts who really just want to show off what they've created with the car. They've done some customization, some engine modifications, those sorts of things, and they just come out, they do their show and shine, and that's, I think that's acceptable to everybody. I mean, I remember being part of that as a younger man myself. The events that we're talking about, the ones where they show up, they'll take over a private property that they don't have permission to be at, or they'll take over a public intersection, or they'll take over facilities, much like you're seeing right now, where they're literally taking over an intersection and they're doing these stunts, and you see people running, it's complete chaos. These are high risk, high danger scenarios where people can seriously be injured.
Now, the types that we're showing here on the screen right now, you referred to these as kind of like pop-up events?
These would be what we categorize as pop-up events. So very little notification. They'll have some sort of group chat going amongst themselves, and they'll just show up someplace, and boom, these things happen. They happen very, very quickly, and they're gone just as fast as we can respond to them.
Wow, that's scary when you say they're gone just as fast as you respond. That leaves a scary element in my mind.
Yeah, and it concerns us a great deal because once the lights and sirens are activated on a police car and you're rolling into a scene, you literally have the scatter effect, which means people are doing anything they can to get away, which means the erratic driving over curbs, high speed.
Yeah.
You can see that there's people everywhere in this particular example. There's a case where somebody got hit.
Wow.
And the culture behind this kind of conduct is what we're trying to deal with the Erase program.
I can't say that I actually knew that this kind of stuff was existent on our streets.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking. It was a real eye-opener for me when I came down and became part of the traffic bureau and started to see these things and starting to hear from the frontline guys who are responding to this. Because a lot of times when we respond to a call, all we've got is perhaps is an accident, right?
Yeah.
And there's a single vehicle into a pool, and that's the information we roll up. As we start to do our investigation, we find out that vehicle was then racing another vehicle and lost control and hit a pool. Or that's how these things often evolve.
Wow. And just like that, just out of nowhere, everyone. So when you say they're chatting, I'm assuming you're talking about on social media or something.
Correct.
They're having a conversation.
Yeah, it's a closed group on some sort of chatter network or whatever.
and then they all end up in the same intersection.
Yep.
And they physically close down the intersection.
Yep.
Just by themselves.
Yes, they do. We've had examples. There's 3 examples right there. These were events that happened in Scarborough. We've had events where they've actually shut down sections of Highway 404 and Highway 407 and done stunting out there. I think pretty much anybody who lives in the South End is familiar with some of the things that go around on the Highway 7 corridor, some of the industrial parkways down there. There's often a lot of impromptu meets.
Yes.
And for the most part, again, I go back to the fact that the meet itself is not necessarily the problem. It's
right.
the conduct where they meet. There's some wagering perhaps going on. There's some, my car's better than your car, and they go somewhere and race. Typically, they're looking for nice, flat, long, straight levels, and Vaughan, Richmond Hill, Brampton, Mississauga.
And some of the industrial areas.
They're absolutely full of those areas.
They're going to have those, right?
Right.
And so at any one of these given events, like how many people would you estimate might even be at one?
We've been to them where there's, as little as 20 or 30 or 40, but in some of the events we've seen 10 to 15,000.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned one about on Highway 407, actually. We had, I'd seen that on the news, and it was incredible. Like, they actually had on-ramps closed.
Yep.
Like, they actually had their own vehicles blocking the on-ramps.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. That one happened in 2016, and I investigated that, and what we found was a whole group got together, and they had these support cars that came out with them. The high-end cars would go out in front. The support cars would block the highway, and these guys would just go, and they would go repeatedly. And even in that particular case, we had a traffic stop conducted on a vehicle after a series of complaints had been phoned in, and arrested and charged the driver. And in the subsequent investigation, we learned that these people are actually organized, and they're talking to each other by cell phone or by Waze apps or any of these other chatter things, and they know what our rules of engagement are. So it becomes very difficult for us to combat that.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And, we were talking earlier before the show. These are people from all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily just just to be clear on it, it's not necessarily just a young bunch of guys out trying to show up each other's cars.
Yeah.
Some of these can be professionals. They might be, one might be your banker, your real estate agent.
We've seen them from all walks of life. We've seen them from the young 16, 17-year-old kid driving the modified Honda Civic to guys in, $300,000 Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
There was an interesting event also in 2016 in April where the OPP stopped 20 Lamborghinis going up towards Barrie.
Yeah, on the 400.
Right. So that was another one where they were, the definition of stunt is essentially a marked departure from driving, and there's a whole series of elements to that. But in this particular case, these guys were videotaping each other, zipping in and out of traffic, driving at high speed. At one point, I recall seeing a video clip where a guy's leaning out the back of the Lamborghini with the door open at highway speeds, filming other cars zipping in and out of traffic behind them.
Wow.
So when those complaints finally reached the OPP dispatch, they shut down the 400 up near Barrie and intercepted all those cars. And that case, I believe, is still before the courts.
Wow. You think of all the endangerment along the way, right? I'm imagining driving up the Highway 400 and encountering that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'm sure we've all seen it. We've all been up the highway where somebody comes up and they just blow your doors off and you're like stunned by it. And imagine less experienced drivers taking defensive actions around that sort of thing. That's where the accidents happen.
Absolutely. And accidents do happen, as a result of some of these, right?
Oh, yeah.
And given the high rate of speed, it's a catastrophic accident.
Yeah, there's been many documented fatals as a result of street racing.
Yeah, it's no longer just a bump into a telephone pole.
No.
Right?
And it's very difficult as a police officer to have to go and do a notification with a family member who's died as a result of street racing because it's so senseless.
Yeah.
It's so preventable.
Yeah, and when we talk about preventable, that's right up there, isn't it?
It's completely preventable. And to me, there's somewhat of an arrogant personality that goes with people who will offend in that nature and not think twice about it. Because I want to go home to my family, you want to go home to your family.
Absolutely.
Why should you pay the price for somebody needing 30 seconds of adrenaline?
Well, this is a perfect example of an outcome of, it's hard to even tell which end of the car you're looking at.
Yeah. That was a fatal out in Brampton, as a matter of fact.
Right? And this was from street racing.
This was a result of street racing.
But it's just testament to, just the term racing. We know that they're already going extremely fast.
Yeah.
When they stop, they're going to stop in an erratic manner, aren't they?
Potentially, yeah. A lot of times when they stop, it's usually because they hit a solid object that doesn't allow them to go any further. As you know, I don't mean to make light of it, but
but that's what it is.
That's exactly what it comes down to. And if they haven't, then they've cut somebody off and created one. There's another one that I wasn't able to provide today, but it was all over the media in 2016, where a young male is driving his girlfriend and her sister home on a highway in Brampton and get hit by a Pontiac Firebird that was involved in a street race, and both cars erupted into flame and everybody died.
Oh,
and
wow.
it was, I remember listening to the father of the girls speaking and pleading with the driver, who was the other driver involved in the race, to turn himself in. And I don't know if they ever did or not, but when you see that kind of carnage, you've got some very innocent people just wanting to get home.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And they're taken out by somebody's selfish behavior.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, that's the kind of outcome that these types of races can have, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and this is all over our region, right? And your officers are obviously everywhere looking for these.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note, folks, we'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everyone, as we continue our conversation about Project Erase with Sergeant Dan St. Amand. Dan, it always baffles me when I learn new things that go on in our region. I've been connected to York Regional Police for a number of years, and speeding, of course, we've been aware of it. Maybe a little bit of street racing. I had no idea that it was so entrenched, though. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the partnerships. We were at an event, or invited to an event, Project Erase, but it wasn't just York Regional Police there. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so typically the Project Erase, it's been around now for over a dozen years, and what started out as a small collaboration of 3 officers who are car guys has now grown into a partnership involving not only York Regional Police, but OPP, Peel Region, Durham, Barrie, South Simcoe, Waterloo, Niagara Region, our partners at the Ministry of Transportation and our partners at the Ministry of the Environment. They all come out to these events. Yeah. We do a combination of enforcement and education, and it's a really wonderful example of that, how everybody's dealing with the same problem, and we're all trying to deal with it with the same language, the same direction of travel, if you will. Everybody's on the same page, and it's typically, those deployments are very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do your own individually. I guess all of the agencies probably do, and then you have like group efforts.
Correct. Yeah. So most agencies will run their own internal stuff. Peel does a very aggressive street racing campaign. They'll run that internally, and then we'll partner up and we'll do things jointly. We run 4 to 6 joint operations during the peak season. And then on top of that, York Regional Police, we run our own internal stuff with our road safety guys, our core units, frontline uniform, and the commercial motor vehicle units. And we'll go out and we'll actually do our own internal stuff in addition to the GTA-wide one. Wow.
Okay. So you're out there in many different forms, right?
Yes.
So a lot of these vehicles that we're looking at, obviously they have some modifications in them. I mean, you know, we're not talking about somebody that just went to the Honda dealership, bought it, and is now out on the street. I guess maybe some education around that is there's some things that you're not actually allowed to do.
Yeah. You have to be aware when you modify your car that just because a part's available or something's available to put on your car doesn't mean it's legal. It could change the engineering components of your car. It could change the performance components of your car. It could change the emission standards of your car. All of those things can lead to charges. So in the case where somebody, for example, has, I'm sure you've seen it, where people have canted their tires in so much they barely look like they can drive, you're probably rendering your vehicle into an unsafe mode, and the vehicle can be pulled off the road.
Wow. Wow. And there's there's other similar modifications, right? Like having tires too wide for the vehicle, and or overpowering a vehicle, I'm sure.
Overpowering a vehicle to some degree, yes. If the frame of your car is designed to operate within a certain parameter, and you all of a sudden drop in a monster engine and you're causing torque issues, you could crack your frame, and that's why our commercial motor vehicle guys, we have 3 mechanics on hand, and those mechanics will do those in-depth inspections of your cars, and if they find those kind of defects, most likely your car will be deemed unsafe and pulled off the road.
Oh wow, okay, so that's it. You're not driving your car until
the problems are fixed.
Unmodified, I guess is the term.
We want the problems fixed.
Yeah.
In whatever capacity. And there have been cases where people have modified their cars to the degree where it's just not worth doing anything.
Oh wow.
And they'll either forfeit the car, or they'll walk away from it, or they'll just strip it out.
Right. Yeah. What else do you do with it, right?
Right.
They've already taken it to that point.
Yeah. If we've gone that far, then it's an extreme case. Most people will make their modifications relatively simply, and they're not complicated in most cases.
Okay.
But it really is subject to the individual car.
Right. And as you said, you're going to inspect those, and you'll make that determination, right?
Yeah.
Good to note that there's a couple of different components to what you're doing. First, the education piece. You want people to be aware, and you'll help them with that. And then, of course, there's the enforcement piece, failing the education, unfortunately. But on the education piece, you're more than willing to work with these car clubs.
Absolutely. Like, we're not looking to go out and hammer the public with tons and tons of tickets. That's never been the whole thing behind a race. That is the byproduct of it. The whole point is to go out and ensure that if they're going to have these meets, the cars are safe, the people operating are doing it in a safe manner. It's not going to interfere with the general public and the general activities of the region.
Sure.
Those are the key elements. I know the sensationalized side of it is, a young guy gets pulled over, gets 9 or 10 tickets, turns around and says, "Oh, the cops were picking on me." When in reality, your car's so badly modified, it's a hazard to be on the road.
It's actually unsafe.
It's completely unsafe. So, the education component is huge.
Yes.
Right? And we want people to understand. We actually, this year, for the beginning of our race campaign, we actually created a little menu. These are the offenses that you can be charged with. Here's what we see. And made it very simple. It's a 2-sided menu. We walk out and we'll hand those out to people saying, we'll just let you know this is what you're dealing with.
Right.
And we're trying to make it as much of a positive as a negative.
Right.
We want people to be willing to engage with us as much as we're willing to engage with them. And again, when we get these cars that have come off these shows and are now doing burnouts and speeding and stunting and driving, those have to be dealt with because that's a safety issue for the community.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course it is. So when you have all of these, all these vehicles, as you say, they say they've all been at a car show, and now they've left, and I'm sure not all of them, but some of them engage in this type of behavior, and it just kind of happens. It's not necessarily even planned, and now we've lost the education piece. Now we've moved into enforcement.
Right.
Right. But where I'm going with it is you're willing to work with them right at the very beginning.
We're trying to work with them in the beginning. We're trying to make these events, when they're going to happen and if they're going to happen, to be as safe and as legal as they can be.
Okay.
We're not looking to go out there and jam the public up at every opportunity. We want those community engagements because that's what policing is about.
Yes. Yeah, positive community engagement.
Absolutely.
Right? And proactive policing, like it all goes hand in hand. I can't imagine not wanting to accept the advice or the education from the experts in your office. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the public who are very willing to talk to us and have those conversations, but you do run into people who are let's say, of an anti-police stance and not really interested in what we have to say, and they were going to do what they're going to do regardless. And that's why the laws were created the way they were, so that when we have to deal with these people, we have enough tools in the toolbox, if you will, to ensure that the message is getting out there. I can't imagine a lot of people can afford to have their car suspended, towed and impounded for 7 days, their license suspended for 7 days. Then you've got the inevitable insurance hikes that are going to come down the road. Most people at the time don't think about that.
No, they don't, and that's a good segue, because that's some of my next questioning was, what are the repercussions here? Somebody's out street racing, and now you've deemed, first of all, they were engaged in illegal activity, but you've also deemed that their vehicle perhaps was over modified.
Yeah.
What happens to that guy?
They could have, well, if they're caught doing a stunt, they can be arrested. They will be charged. They're looking at it's what we call a no-set fine. So there's a minimum maximum that's applicable through the courts under the Highway Traffic Act. Okay. That's up to the courts to decide what the final fine will be. Potentially, they're looking at jail time. It's an either-or kind of deal, or both, depending on the circumstances. There's the 7-day impound. There's the fine that goes with it, and the loss of your driver's license for 7 days. That's just for stunt. In cases like what we saw in the videos here, where you've got a crowd of people, I might also be looking at criminal charges of dangerous operation. If somebody gets hurt, then it's dangerous operation, cause bodily harm, cause death, whatever the case happened to be.
Wow.
Now you're looking at extensive jail time. Yeah. On top of fines.
Wow. And worthy to note that when you say impounded for 7 days, you're paying for that impound.
Oh, yeah.
That's not just parked in somebody's parking lot and you can go and free and clear pick it up.
That's right, and the towing industry, being what it is, your fines can get up there real fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's your responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
So one fun night out, ripping it up with your buddies, and that potentially just costs you about 10 grand, and you're lost your vehicle for a week. Yeah,
and undoubtedly you're probably going to hire a lawyer to help you. So yeah, I would say that's probably very fair.
That's insane. As well as you had actually mentioned your insurance. That could also be an increase.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you get caught and charged and convicted with stunt or dangerous or any of those driving-related offenses, you can guarantee your insurance are going to go up substantially.
I guess that's along the same lines as impaired or
absolutely
or other similar charges, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how many people are actually in your unit that oversee or work with the erase program?
Well, it's flexible. Like Erase is sort of not so much a group of people as a amalgamation of people when an event is scheduled. So if we are doing an initiative or whatever, we'll assemble a team.
Right. So that's what you're saying, you would pull from other...
That's right. So we might use officers from one of our core units. We might use our frontline Road Safety Bureau members. We will definitely engage some of our commercial motor vehicle guys, because most of them are mechanics. We will reach out to our partners with MTO or MOE, because they have different authorities to charge, and some of their fines can be quite steep. And we'll go out and we'll do a joint enforcement initiative. Right. And they're usually very, very effective.
Yes. Oh, no, they would be. You've got all angles of enforcement on the plate. So I just want to go back a little bit. You had mentioned that this was developed several years ago. Can you talk a little bit about where this came from then?
Well, actually, our former Staff Sergeant Dave Mitchell and an officer from Peel Regional Police and an officer from the OPP were all car enthusiasts back in the day, and I was trying to find the exact deadline when it happened. I want to say it's about 12 years ago. Yeah. They got together and realized that there was a real problem in this particular field, so they started kind of forming their own little joint force operation, and that just sort of expanded over the years, and more people started to realize how much of a problem it was, and to the point that it's at now, where typically we might do a GTA enforcement and have 30 to 40 officers involved, including MOE and MTO. Right. And because the 400 series highway tends to be the natural culvert for people to travel from region to region, yes. The OPP is vital in that.
Yeah, of course.
So, and we share a lot of information, a lot of the same events get shared across the board, so we're all aware of some of the players that are involved. Yes. And we look at different enforcement strategies, we look at different education strategies. We try and come up with a similar message and a similar way of doing business. Yeah, you've all got to work together in enforcing it, right? And as you said earlier on in the first segment, the number of policing agencies that are involved in this is huge. Yeah. And it's not just a York-Toronto problem. They have the same events down in Niagara Falls. They have the same events down in London. Yeah. They have the same events down in Windsor. You can go all the way up to Ottawa, Montreal. The community is extensive, right? And the depending on the money and the parties involved. You may have a race that starts in Detroit, Michigan, and ends up in Ottawa.
So when you say money, like, is there a windfall at the end of this?
Sometimes, potentially, there is gambling involved. We know that in some events money is exchanged. Sometimes it's just a race doesn't have to be, I'm going to give you $50 if you beat me. It could be two guys coming up to a light, looking at each other, giving the old head nod, and away they go.
Right.
That's very common.
Yeah, that's the more impromptu one, right?
Right.
But the more organized ones, they could actually even have a prize pot at the end of it, right?
Yep, absolutely.
That's insane. but it very, very organized, and I guess that's back to the whole social network or social media piece. I mean that only elevates it again, doesn't it?
Yeah, it allows them a very fast element to organize, even on an impromptu scale, organize an event, get out, deploy, do their thing, and then scatter before we even get an opportunity to get to ground in some cases. And
that's fantastic.
Cases like that, we rely on the public, and they're making those phone calls saying, hey, there's guys street racing, and we'll respond to that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being here, Dan.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Folks, that wraps up this episode of Policing York Region. Look forward to seeing you again.